presentation contains graphic images of animal abuse for educational purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised. What comes to mind when you think of sharks? For some of us, they're dangerous predators that live in the oceans waiting to eat us. For others of us, they're our favorite animals when we visit the aquarium, but we really don't know much about how they function in our oceans or what they do. Today, I want to tell you a little bit about sharks and the effects that finning and fishing are having on their populations in our oceans. Sharks have been around for at least 400 million years. That is actually 200 million years longer than dinosaurs. Sharks have survived at least 5 mass extinctions, and yet they are going extinct at a rapid rate. How can a species that survived even when the dinosaurs didn't be suddenly going extinct? Well, the answer is one that might shock all of us, and that is us, humans. The impact that we have on our oceans is pretty extreme. Many people have probably heard about global warming, pollution, and climate change, and these are all very pressing issues, but I'd argue that there is another pressing issue that we should all educate ourselves on, and that is commercial fishing. Shark finning and fishing practices are really controversial, and there are also cultural issues that differ on a global scale. In some Asian cultures, fishing for fins is customary to tradition for shark fin soup. So what happens when these fish are killed for their fins is that they're fished, and then the fins are cut off the fish are thrown overboard, and they essentially die a slow and painful death because they drown and they're unable to swim. They don't die immediately. This is a picture in Hong Kong on a rooftop, and these are all fins in this picture. So they lay out the fins to dry in random places wherever they have room. So on rooftops, in the streets, all for shark fin soup, which from what I've read has no taste, but it represents wealth in their culture, and so it is a widely sought after thing for things like weddings and banquets. They often serve shark fin soup. In the United States, shark fishing is done for personal trophies and for thrill. They have competitions. Due to high metal levels in shark, the meat isn't even eaten because it's not safe, it's inedible. The fact of the matter is that these animals cannot sustain this rate that they're being fished at for these purposes. When we think of fish, we generally think of hundreds of eggs, mass production, multiple times throughout their life. But sharks are much like mammals in the sense that they don't lay eggs. They are also much like humans, and they have to come to maturity before they can reproduce. They only reproduce a couple of pups at a time, and they only reproduce every couple of years, much like whales and dolphins. In fact, while searching pictures of mothers and their pups like this one, this was the only alive picture I found on Google, and the rest of the pictures looked much like this, where babies were being removed from dead mothers on beaches, on boats. A lot of times they'll catch fish that have babies in them. For a fish that's being killed at a rate of over 11,000 sharks per hour and only reproducing a couple of pups at a time, this is clearly unsustainable for these animals. So what's the issue then? Why do we even need sharks? Well, sharks are the ocean's natural predators. They're vital to making sure other species of fish don't grow out of control. Sharks are the police of coral reefs, vital to, again, making sure that species don't grow out of control. So if you have one species in a food chain that grows out of control, then they take over the food chain, and sharks make sure that that doesn't happen. Well, more importantly, they are vital to phytoplankton production. Phytoplankton is essential for oxygen production in our world. So without phytoplankton, there's no oxygen. And obviously with no oxygen, there's no humans. Therefore, we need these animals a lot more than we realize. You may be thinking to yourself, if this is true, then why aren't the governments stopping finning and fishing and regulating this? And the answer isn't simple. It's a web of political and cultural differences on a global scale that takes coming together. And even if sharks aren't being purposely fished or finned, they're caught accidentally as bycatch every day. Bycatch is when they're fishing for other fish like tuna, sardines, all these fish that we see on the shelves of our grocery stores. Little do we know that they catch sharks along with these fish, and sharks even swim into these nets, and they're not trying to catch them, but that's what happens because nets are widely unregulated as well, which also adds to the pollution in our oceans. We see countries like Hong Kong importing more shark fins than any other country in the world, and it being widely unregulated by their government. And then we see countries like the US, where we import and we export fins, even though finning itself is banned in the US. It was banned over a decade ago, but we still allow major vessels to port in our fishing ports, and we allow them to also fly fins across our country. So oftentimes from South America, they'll fly them through North America. They'll port in our ports as they go to Hong Kong and they head that way. And therefore, we are still profiting as a nation from shark finning, even though it's banned on paper. This is all pretty depressing stuff, and I highly doubt that any of us are trying to ruin the ocean or be the cause of sharks going extinct. So then what can we do? Well, I could sit here and talk about what people aren't and aren't doing with legislation. I could tell you about the organizations that are meant to be protecting these fish, and they aren't. Or we can take matters into our own hands. We can educate ourselves and those around us, and we can know that finning is inhumane. We can understand that sharks aren't a proper food source and push legislature to implement safer ways to fish so they don't end up as bycatch, such as regulating the nets and studying these fish and their practices. We can stop fishing a species that we know so little about for sheer sport, and instead try to have a better understanding about the gentle giants in our oceans that have outlived the dinosaurs. Think about it. If dinosaurs were alive, would we be killing them to their extinction and mass murdering them, or would we study them and protect them and be pushing as a collective for their conservation? We need to educate ourselves and those around us and push a human collective cause for these animals. I think that part of the problem is that we don't see sharks the way that we see other predatory species. They don't have cute features, they're not fuzzy, and we generally are very afraid of sharks. How many of you actually found the graphic images that I warned about in this presentation to be disturbing or uncomfortable to you, or even upsetting to you? Did they even bother you? We're desensitized to the mass murdering of one of the oldest species on our planet, and it's a problem that we all need to face. It's an issue that we can teach our children and their children, and we can work collectively to create a change. The bottom line here is that if we don't do something, sharks won't be the only species that's dying. Every living thing on this planet, again, depends on phytoplankton, including us. So we had better start thinking about advocating for sharks before we end up being the reason that a species that has survived for more than 400 million years goes extinct. Because the fact of the matter is that if we end up killing all of the sharks, they're taking us down with them. Thank you.